Who resigned? Excuse me.
Who, the chairman resigned.
The woman that I met last time?
Yeah, Sherry.
Oh, okay.
So she resigned, I think probably about 2 weeks ago now.
Oh, I see.
Well, the good thing is, Bruce, I'm going to be staying in my home, so I will be living in Lake Worth indefinitely. I was not sure of that when I shared some of that personal information with you. So I'm happy, again, I didn't get a lot of experience early on, but I'm happy to keep moving forward, and I'll talk with Sarah, and I think the appointment's actually Betty's. It's a mayor.
That's correct. Yes.
Betty's. Okay. So I'll try to put that along as well.
But there's 2 other members that we need to appoint also. We should have 7 members. We only have 4 at the moment. So in order to get a full complement of members, we need not just Sherry's reappointment, but 2 additional on top of that.
Bruce, do you know which 2 commissioners have seats?
Candace, do you? I know we looked at it. I forget at the moment.
Yeah, give me 1 second to pull it up really quick.
Okay. So I can help also take lead on that, maybe reach out to some contacts in the city, because there's a guy that I've really tried to want to come on board. So
That'd be great. Anything you can do would be very, very helpful.
okay.
And I guess what we should do is, if it's all right with you, then is formally appoint you as the chairman, and
Okay.
then nominate and elect a vice chairman.
So I can't make that motion since I'm the one for
That's
the.
right. That's correct. So there needs to be a motion and vote from the floor.
I so move.
Is there a second? We need a second for Lindy's chairmanship.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's congratulations, Lindy. We'll be working together to get this thing moving forward. And then we need a vice chair. Are there any nominations?
Chuck, when do you come back from Spain?
2 weeks.
Would you be interested? I mean, you know the lay of the land here.
I'll help any way I can, but you need to understand, I do 6 months and 6 months. So. But it's all Zoom anyway, so all right.
Yeah, I was going to say with this Zoom, it's like makes things very convenient.
Yeah, our Laura, I mean, I know you're new to the board. It really, honestly, it's just on paper at this point until we can get our board reestablished. And since, if you are here full time like I am, it's either one is fine with me, Bruce. I know that's not very formal, but.
Well, just to make things formal so we can document what, if we can get a motion for any member and then have a vote, then we can put this one behind us.
Sure. So I'd like to put a motion forward for Laura, if you would mind, to serve as the vice, just given that Chuck is part-time here. If you would be willing to accept that nomination, I'd like to put a vote forward for Laura to move forward as vice chair.
I second.
Yeah, see, for me, I was just kind of feeling this whole thing out since I just joined, but okay.
We'll make it work.
Okay.
Okay. Can we have a vote, please? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Congratulations, Laura. All right. Do you all have the do you all have the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
If we can get a approval of the minutes from our last meeting, that would be great.
So Bruce, is that something that I would just lead and just ask for approval of the minutes? So
Yeah.
if everyone can review, if you have approval of the minutes, any deletions or additions?
I second.
So minutes approved, Bruce.
Okay, very good. So the next thing is the work plan for the year. If you want to adopt a work plan or start thinking about a work plan, the priorities of the advisory board, what you want to accomplish. I don't know if there's anything that is front and center, but I think things will work better moving forward if we have somewhat of a little bit of a structure to move things forward. And you know, we're going to be talking about budget here pretty soon. We're going to be talking about strategic planning. The audit also was front and center, but anything from the committee that they would like to discuss moving forward.
It can be an open-ended discussion right now.
Right.
Bruce.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, before I initiate a discussion, I wanted to tell the rest of the group that I had met with Bruce about a month ago, and it was just terrific. I learned a lot. I still have a lot to learn. And he was very open with every issue that I asked. And that's ideal when you're dealing with public servants. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the kind words.
I suspect that this is a recreational issue today. Is that what we're supposed to be speaking to? Or are we not going to have the rec board, Lauren Bennett, here today? Am I confused?
I'm confused.
Oh, I may have confused you, so I'm sorry.
I did not know that. If you would like to talk to the rec director, that's definitely something that we can put on the agenda. And that's something that, yeah, this meeting is setting items up for discussion for future agendas. Do you want, for example, do you want to understand the sales tax better? Do you want to understand the budget process and the budget itself in more detail, and the capital budget in more detail, and the capital projects that go with that? Would you like to understand the bonding process better? Before, there was a lot of conversation on the casino building and the operations of the casino building. Is that something that people want to discuss? Or if you want to, I'll come up with some issues that might be a potential for conversation. But what I'm trying to generate is a conversation of what this particular board would like to accomplish, so that we can start moving the ball forward. You know, I don't want to put you in a position next year where you are receiving the budget a couple of nights before the budget hearing and have no time to have that interaction with the city commissioners as you're an advisory board to the city commission. You know, you need ample time to digest and understand what it is that you're advising. We're going to be coming up and issuing a bond for the combined utility. So that's going to be something that I want to put something in front of you, front and center, so that you can, you know, advise give your opinion relative to what your thoughts are on the upcoming utility bond. So that would be one thing. We're right in the infancy of this conversation with the financial advisors, but this is something that should be front and center relative to things that we discuss. So, but again, I didn't know if there's any other, I know, Don, that you're interested in the sales tax. Would you like to have that same conversation in more detail with the advisory board so that they have a good understanding of the inflows and outflows and what's committed and what's not committed to the sales tax? Another issue is ARPA. And that money coming down, we have over $10 million of discretionary revenues and another $9 million on top of that for that's specific to ARPA restrictions.
If you're asking, should I answer that?
Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, well, I think the penny sales tax is an important tool. And I think I understand it better. Bruce made me understand it better. But I would suggest that the advisory group consider learning as much about it as we can. It's a windfall tax that allows us to do things that we might not normally be able to do. And I think there has been I've had a preliminary discussion with Bruce with regard to the American Recovery Act. And I think there's $18 million coming in. 9 million has come in as of about a month ago. And there's another 9 million coming in. That is, I guess its purpose was to help municipalities. And in this municipality, we were going to get $18 million. Each town gets a different amount, I guess, depending on the formula. And this town is going to get 18 million. It has received 9 million. It has some guidelines around it. I perceived the one guideline was a catchphrase that would allow us to be a little more creative. I wasn't sure, but I think that I would recommend to the group that they look at that, because we're trying to get the town to grow in any inventive, imaginative way we can. And so these are tools that we could use. An infrastructure bill is coming by eventually, I suspect, but Bruce tells me that that will be state controlled and really outside our purview. Is that a fair statement, Bruce?
Yeah, just from experience, anytime there's a federal stimulus type package, my experience is that it does flow through the states.
It will get here eventually.
And with a possible trickle down, correct?
Yes.
The ARPA funds are more of the exception rather than the rule. So I haven't seen the any final on the stimulus package, but I suspect it will be more state driven.
You mean the infrastructure bill that hasn't passed?
Exactly, right.
The minor one.
Yeah, the minor.
For lack of a better term.
Yes.
I think, Bruce, I can just speak for myself after, living in Lake Worth for the last 7.5 years. I feel like all of the boards really have not had enough face time with the commissioners. It's like we would meet collectively every month. And then of course with COVID, but I feel like if we could, when you talk about a work plan, I think that we need to keep that scope small and lean on you. But I think there's certain areas, and you guys can agree or disagree, like the casino building, for example, right? That's something that has been a lingering issue for quite some time. And I feel like that now with the potential for the ARPA money and the penny sales tax, that there's a lot that could be done with that facility now that there could be some funding for that. But I don't think you have enough citizen sort of education even around that. So I think that if we do come up with a work plan, I would like it to be that the things and the topics that we discuss, Bruce, are things that are sort of live and going on in front of the commission to correlate with our meetings, that we could get in front of them for, whatever time that we have, 10 minutes, or if it's written comments. But I think in order for us to be active, we can't just wait till the budget. I think we need to be more engaged.
Yeah.
Each month or every other month, whatever time allows, especially if there's bigger ticket items. Because we're putting a lot of faith in this commission around a lot of money that is not earmarked. And that's concerning to me a little bit.
Well, would you like me to talk to the mayor and see? I don't suspect it will be a long meeting per se.
No.
But is it more of I don't know how joint meetings work in the state of Florida, but up in Maryland, and then further north, you had to have a joint meeting. And that was if you did that, you would have to, open and close all the different meetings, and it got very cumbersome. Is it more of just a dialogue, or you want more formal interchange?
I think, Bruce, when I served on the committee prior to COVID, we only really met in front of the commission when it came down to budget, and we gave that small presentation, right, just around sort of what our advisory board felt were items that we felt they should focus on or not, But
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Let me flip it maybe a little bit. Would it make sense to invite the chairman to this meeting?
I mean, we used to have representation. I mean, Herman Robinson used to come to these when we were meeting in person because he was trying to move forward with the initiative with the casino, right? With the pool. I don't know. Do we have a liaison is there a chairperson on the committee
I'm your liaison.
Okay.
In theory. But I understand your motivation to improve dialogue and whatnot between the commissioners and the financial advisory board. I'm just trying to, let me ask you this. If you wish, I'll talk to the mayor and ask her for her input, and then get back to you guys relative to how she thinks would be the best and the most appropriate way of facilitating what it is that you're seeking. And I could talk to the city attorney to get her input if it has to be a joint meeting, or if it can be something a little bit more informal, what the options are. But understanding that you want a forum to generate conversation and discussion and complete the loop, if you will, the feedback loop.
Yeah, and I'll be back in town. I'm just in Nashville and San Diego, so I'm happy to get some time with you, Bruce. I'll be back in 2 weeks, so I can get on your calendar, and maybe you and I can talk about how I can even help navigate some of those conversations as well.
That's great.
Okay.
Do we have consensus?
Yes.
Yeah, I personally think that's a good idea. Bruce, thank you, first of all, clarifying at the beginning of the meeting is the process of this whole thing, because for me, it seems so confusing, and we were pulled in so late in the game in terms of reviewing a budget, and I didn't feel like we had the adequate time to do that and provide any feedback.
Right.
So I'm still learning on what our actual function is, and I feel like we do need guidance from the commissioners on what they need from us, because I thought that's what I was understanding, that's what they needed, was guidance from us, because they don't have time to go through all that stuff and look at that.
You're definitely in an advisory capacity to the commissioners, and the more you can get into the substantive detail of any financial issue, and provide your insight and perspective, I think, that's what they would be looking for and hoping for. And I think in other communities, a lot of the financial advisory commissions focus were on the operating policies, financial policies, making sure that those were sound, looking at, the operation, the budget and the capital programming components. But, that's, let's say, as 4 or 5 months out of the year. And the rest of the time was really trying to move the communities in a direction that just strengthened the overall financial condition of the city, and trying to provide input to what those steps would be. So, it's really 6 months, you're looking at specific issues, and then 6 months of trying to move the community in a fiscally responsible way. And then shifting gears back to the more, the budget reviews and the capital stuff.
And
Yes.
so when can we expect to start being pulled into the budget for next year then, so that we're not, trying to catch up?
Very important. And just give everybody a little bit of what our current thinking is. We're going to have my understanding is that we're going to have a strategic planning sometime in the fall with the administration, including the commissioners, and they're going to identify what their priorities are going to be. From there, we're going to start formulating the first budgets, and that's going to be all done in January and February. Hopefully by March, those preliminary budgets will be finalized. I say preliminary because we won't even know what the new tax values are. We don't get that information until, I think, end of June, early July. So there's going to be some assumptions, and in that case, significant assumptions, because that's our most for the general fund, that's our largest revenue source. But those are the conversations that we want to start moving forward. So if we get the budget out, let's say in end of March, early April timeframe, you as advisory board will have ample time to really get into the meat and potatoes of what that budget is. And I suspect that you'll want to go into a little bit more detail than what I provided you as an overview by department, but get into more of the programs, understanding the programs, seeing if there's better opportunities to expend dollars, and just again get into that dialogue, and rather than coming in at the end of the process and giving your opinions on things. If we do have these monthly meetings with the city commissioners, generate that dialogue back and forth, and be participatory in the development versus reactionary at the end where you're giving an opinion. And quite honestly, the night or the first or second hearing, there's not going to be a lot of change. So you want to get in front and start participating and driving policy sooner rather than later. Donald? Donald?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, as I've been in this city for 5 years now, and I see things that could be improved. And because I think they could be improved, in some cases, they would cost some money. And the question then is it appropriate for I or the other members of the group, if they see something that needs to be adjusted, cut back, added on, to start that conversation with you, because it ends up affecting the revenues of Lake Worth Beach? For instance, I'll give you a scenario, if that would help. The library hours, from my point of view, no one else's but mine right now, are very restricted. And it causes me despair because I think people need the opportunity to use the library. Some disadvantaged people, some people work all day and cannot get to the library till at night. The library isn't open at night. And so I'm using that as an example, whether you agree with it or not, procedurally, could we have a discussion on something like that and try to get a fiscal note on something like that? And maybe get an approval or not an approval on something like that? Is that a reasonable course of action for a participant in this group? To
Well-
raise that issue, share it with the rest of the group and ask them if they would abide by it, by the very premise of it, we need more hours. I'm not making that argument now. I'm
No,
saying, is that a reasonable course to take as a participant in this group?
Okay, a couple things. For it to come from the Financial Advisory Board, we need to follow the due process of the Financial Advisory Board. If you want to talk to any of the commissioners as a private citizen and say, hey, listen, I really would like to see the hours of the library expanded for XYZ reasons. As a resident of the community, you are definitely allowed to do that, if you will. But once you say this is an opinion or direction from the Financial Advisory Board, it needs to move through the Financial Advisory Board. So one of the things that I would recommend doing between now and maybe January, because January is when we want to start the budget process, is come up with some of those budgetary issues that you would like to have the city commissioners discuss and address during the budget process. So yeah, maybe you want to have a discussion on that, and let's say, I'm making it up now, in November, where you are putting out your budgetary priorities or concepts to share, again, prior to the adoption process. So there's nothing wrong with that.
The question is, would there be an allowance for an advocacy of any issue in front of the board that the board might find that they also agree with, and then the board could sponsor? Take the library hours. I'm not arguing for library hours now,
No, it's a good example.
but it's a good example. I do believe this, but that's not what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to figure out if we took that kind of issue or any other kind of issue, and the group agreed that maybe we should do something on that issue. Do you see the Financial Advisory Board sponsoring that issue to the mayor and the commissioners? Is that a procedure that's appropriate?
Yeah, again, I think if you put a list of issues from the FAB and voted through the FAB process, that these are priorities that you would like to see included in the adoption process. I wouldn't say advocacy per se. That's just my general, because you're not advocating. You are a advisory board. You're not a advocacy board. And I think they're, again, professionally, I think those are two separate and distinct perspectives or drivers. But it's also important, and I would recommend, as you noted up front, revenues are short. So you need to be able to, if you're going to help drive the budget conversation, we all want more services. How are those services paid for? And how are they sustained? And that's always problematic. So if you're going to recommend adding over here, there needs to be conversation on how do we facilitate that just within the operating budget. Because again, it's easy to say, we want this, we want this, we want this. The hard question is, how are we going to achieve that? And as advisory commission, I think we need to be able to provide that kind of decision-making and policy assistance. It's not just, we want more, it's how do we do this while doing this?
Chuck, I would be interested to hear you and Laura's, I'm a firm believer in taking small bites out of big projects. Like for you, Chuck, and Laura, what would be your top 2 priorities that as an advisory board from a fiscal standpoint from the city, you feel like we should focus on? Like, do you have 2 particular areas that you think would be most beneficial prior to going into next year's budget season that we'd want to address with the commission?
Who are you asking?
You and Laura.
I personally would want to clean up the downtown area. If we're trying to attract more people to come here, whether it be just for dinner or to live. I go downtown all the time. I have friends that live down that way. I live on North Palm Way, but I go down there all the time. I love it. But I would like this to come together, that come up with ideas on how to clean it up down there because it's much different down there than it is up here 10 blocks north. There's dog crap everywhere. People don't clean it up. I think there's a way to fix that by just putting up some of those signs that have the doggy bags in it. So people are encouraged to clean it up, maybe find people that don't clean it up. And there's probably lots of other ideas to clean up, but just like if you go 2 blocks down, 2 blocks up, it's much different there than it is going further north.
So you would like to see more of the budget put into beautification projects or tourism. So we have a tourism board right now. So I'll make note of that. Chuck, what about you? What do you think would be your top 2?
Well, I mentioned it to Bruce a while back. As I've gone through this budget, it's spent some time on that. I'm finding an awful lot of comments under the various work plans. For example, public services grounds on page 32, they've got a line there, and I'm finding it in many of the areas, other contractual services. And it's a pretty big number. In this case, it's 260,000. I find others in other areas that they want 100,000 for other contractual services. And that, I'm interested in that to find out just what are they referring to? What are they planning to do? And I think we need to drill down on that a little bit, because I in my dealings with the city over the past few years, I've seen there's a tendency for them to go out and do surveys and all of that, and then they spend a lot of money on these various surveys, and sometimes something beneficial and implementable, if there is such a word, comes out of it, but not always. So if we're in the process of looking at a work plan now for the FAB, then one of my recommendations would be that we take a little bit closer look at that across all the departments, because almost all of them have something like that plugged in there. And when you add it all up, it comes to quite a lot of money. And I'd like to make sure we're spending that, we're hiring outside consultants wisely. So that would be one for sure. Go ahead, Bruce.
For our next meeting, it's about a month out, would you like us to compile a list of all the others And maybe first blush, I'll just give you the raw data. Yannick, it shouldn't take too long to be able to compile that. And then maybe after going through that, the next meeting, we can maybe even bring department heads in as part of the call so that you can get a little bit more detail. So that would be a good primer for the next budget. That's what I'm thinking.
I was just answering Lindy's question. I'm not speaking on behalf of the other members.
No, I understand, but maybe this is something.
I mean, for example, that could cover a whole host of things. So if we could just get a little more clarity on, all right, this is the grounds department, 260,000. Are they renting some kind of specialized trucks for some particular purpose? And that's smarter to do that than it is to buy them and maintain them over a long life period. So, and that may be fine. I just, right now, you don't really have any information about that and what it is and what that money's being spent on. And that was kind of what I'd like to get a little more daylight on.
Well, we can definitely do that.
And if the FAB wants to put it on as an agenda item or something, that's fine. But to answer your question, my second item would be, as Don's interested in very much in the pool, I'm kind of interested in just going through some of the documents for funding of the golf course.
Yeah.
None of the commissioners play golf. I don't see anybody in any kind of senior position paying much attention to that. And we have to be very careful with our golf course. It's very valuable property, and we need to make sure that, and it's also a profit center, isn't it, Bruce?
Yes, sir.
One of the few things.
It is now. It used to be just the opposite of a profit center.
Well, but I mean, that and the parking lot at the beach are two of the big contributors, as I understand it now. So.
Well, the golf course is break even. If we break even, we're happy. Whereas the parking is a revenue driver for the.
I would tell you that I find it hard to believe that we can't make a profit on that golf course. So that would be the second item, Lindy, that you asked me about.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. Every other golf course around makes a ton of money, and we're not doing something right down there, if you ask me. So I'd like to get a little smarter on that.
Laura, you're on mute.
Another thing, just to add to that parking situation, in the downtown area, I know there's properties that are slated to be torn down around the businesses, behind the businesses, and I believe it's to create more parking there. And I think that could also be more profit in terms of if we charge people to park in those places when they come to dinner downtown or whatever. Those buildings and those old houses are just sitting there vacant at this point, and it's been probably at least a year now.
Well, the L&M area, if that's what you're talking about, Laura, the L&M area right now is a real hot potato in the city. There's been quite a lot going on that. And I think, Bruce, correct me, but I think we're kind of, the city's kind of in a holding pattern until you have a city manager hired, yeah? Regarding the L&M project and going forward with the CRA on that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is a very politicized issue, and waiting for the new leadership to come in and carry the ball.
And she's been hired, and first name is last name's Davis, right? She's the lady that's coming from Jackson, Mississippi.
Correct. Carmen.
And I think one of the things, to Bruce's point, like we kind of got into this a little bit a couple of years ago, is that we all have sort of social agendas, right, that we care about in the city because we work here, we live here. But I think to his point, anything that we bring forward, we have to tie it into our mission as the FAB, which is from that fiscal standpoint. So I just want us to be mindful of that. I think it's great that we can tie those things into those proposals when we do have that time in front of the commission. But I think it's just important to remember sort of where we serve in those advisory boards. And so I don't want to ever feel like I'm not valuing those opinions, but I just want you to be mindful we have to tie them back into our role from a fiscal standpoint for the city, just with this current board that we serve on. So it's something we all get very passionate about. And so I was reminded of that a few years ago when I first came onto the board as well. So, but I love the idea of digging deeper into those funds, Bruce, that are not sort of a little bit autonomous, if you're, you know, that you don't really know what they are. I love the idea about the downtown initiatives, Laura. I think there's a lot going on with the city right now, and then we have a lot of money that's coming down the pike that could be used for that tourism board beautification project. And Don, with you too. I mean, the casino building, whether you're pro pool, not pool, want grass or water, it needs to be addressed. And so I think we can really serve to have that engagement with the commission beyond just the budget. So I think these are all great starting points for that conversation for a work plan.
Madam Chairman, Donald likes to say something.
Yes, I would. I think it is extremely important when we suggest something that we want, that we find a way to get a pay for.
Right.
Okay, I have no problem with that. That's just responsible. And so that if I or others suggest something, I would hope we could find a pay for it. That is, looking at other parts of the budget where there are inefficiencies, maybe we can pick it up there, or we can pick it up with anticipated revenue from the Recovery Act. I don't know, but I respect that that's the way we ought to look at it, because it gives us more credibility, number one. And I'm sure I made you aware when I first came on the board that I am a big supporter of the pool, and we are going to probably get a pool. And I have pushed for the last 3.5 years with the items that will allow it to pay for itself. I believe that's the correct way to go. And I just wanted to share that with you. But the pay for is the most important thing. That if we do suggest something, we have much more credibility if we're saying this is how we might pay for it. So I would assume that that's how others would think, but I haven't heard. I think it's how most of you might think, but I don't know that for sure. Well, that stopped the conversation.
No, I agree with
meant-
you.
it
I'm
wasn't
nodding
meant
my
to.
head. I agree.
Yeah, you don't have to agree with me. I mean, I'm just saying that anything I've ever suggested in my public life, I felt that we had that responsibility. And I didn't know the rest of the group, and Bruce had raised it. The only other question I might ask is, I'm not sure, because you can tell how I talk, the difference exactly between advisory and advocacy. And I'd like, because I'm a natural advocate, I believe in advocacy. And since we're on a board and we're learning about numbers and how the city might operate, for me, it opens up an opportunity for advocacy that you can accept or reject. That's how I think about things. I think I should share that with you. That's all.
To
I sorry.
I put out those words. The advisory component, in my perspective and training, has a sense of, especially with the financial component that we should be, or not we, the advisory board should be advising on prudent financial direction. Whereas advocacy doesn't always have that sense of prudency, what would the prudent man test, right? What would a prudent man do under these circumstances? It's more trying to drive a policy, not always thinking about what the unintended consequences are and what the prudent or the fiscally responsible thing would be along that advocacy role.
I understand.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention, Bruce, I do have a hard stop at 7 because I have a business dinner at 7:15 that I have to be at. So I just want to put that out to you guys for this evening. So.
Well, I'm retired and I feel very badly for you.
I mean, we didn't travel for
I
a
don't have
year
any
and a
more
half.
business.
And now I feel like I'm so socially engaged again. I'm almost overstimulated by it. Like I actually went into an office today and it's like the first time I got my my booster. So now they feel like we can all just be together. And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm ready. So, and I'm going to be in San Diego for the weekend. So I'm really like, I just pulled the Band-Aid off. I figured I've had COVID, I've had the booster. Hell, I don't know what else to do. If I get it, I'm gonna get it. Like, I don't even know anymore.
Yep.
Well, it's a couple weeks, they say, before you, I'm not sure, but that's what I've been listening to, that it seems to be a couple weeks for it to take full effect.
She's throwing caution to the wind, Donald.
It's the third one. I said, if I'm not there by then, but I do want to just share with each of you, if you have connections in Lake Worth that you think would enjoy being on this board with us. As Bruce mentioned, we are 3 positions down. I do encourage you to have those conversations with your friends, your neighbors, and then we can direct the commissioners and Candace, did you find out who the other 2 commissioners are that have open positions on the board?
It just says District 2 appointment and District 3 appointment.
Okay, so that's Stokes and Robinson.
That's Robinson and who? I'm sorry.
Stokes, Kim Stokes.
Oh, I see.
Robinson is 4.
Oh, that's right. It's McVoy, excuse me.
It's McVoy and Stokes.
Mm-hmm.
And being new members, they might not even know that there's vacancies. Chairman, would you like me to follow up, or would you like to follow up with that?
If you could just let them know, Bruce, that they have the appointments, and then I'll start hitting the streets a little bit on my end too, through the neighborhood associations, just seeing if there's any interest to let them know who has the appointments.
Very good. I'll do that.
Okay. Bruce, anything else you have on the agenda for tonight?
No, it was pretty limited, but I think it was a very fruitful conversation.
Agree. And do you think we'll go back to meeting in person anytime soon, or still on Zoom for now?
I'm hoping that we'll, with the infection rates coming down in the state, I think the conversation is leaning to more open business. But I have not heard any final decisions relative to that. I'm hoping that it will be allowed for both the the Zoom meetings, but having the meetings live, because I think historically you might be able to attend the Zoom meeting but not be able to attend. So I think it helps to keep the quorum rates up and just general participation. So I'm hoping that will be the direction, but uncertain at the moment.
Okay.
Bruce, what's the, when this board does meet, where do they meet?
They meet downstairs in the, next to the chamber. So when you walk through the front door, it's the door immediate to your right.
I'm okay with face-to-face if, whenever we're able to do that. I also had COVID and I've been vaccinated, and well, I had COVID before I was vaccinated, and I'm gonna get a booster, so I'm ready. I was working out already out in the field, going to work every day, so it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I think everybody's a little cabin fever.
Yeah, I just think meetings are so much more effective when it's face-to-face. I don't know why, but it's just more interactive and people communicate better that way.
Well, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't have any other business, thank you all for entrusting me. I will get back in town, and Bruce, I will call Candace and get on your calendar. And I love Lake Worth, so anything we can do to serve, I'm always happy to be a part of. So if no other items, I move to adjourn. If there's a second.
Second.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.
Bye.